welcome to Unite Planet. And we're here in Skype land, as it is. You know how it is. We're not doing it because of social distancing. It's just the distance itself. I mean, Michael's way over there and we're way over here. So that's the reason why. So don't think it's because of social distancing. We've got Michael Feeley, our good friend Michael Feeley, with us today. Hello, Michael. Welcome to Unite Planet yet again.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Very welcome here. And we're going to discuss lots of different topics that I know you have worked on over many years. So we're just going to let it kind of flow however you want it, whatever information and whatever you want to discuss. And, we'll just go with that. We're quite easy natured here. So we'll start with, well, where do you want to start, Michael? I mean, what are you looking at the moment? I know you've got a lot going on at the moment. Anything that you want to bring up to start the ball rolling? What you're looking into at the moment?
Well, I think it just seems to follow me and just seems to come to me in relation to the subject, which forever expands. So the things that I looked in, weeks ago and months ago and years ago, always seems to come back full circle, but at a deeper level, at a greater depth.
Ah, right, yeah.
So the subjects I would have spoken about last year when we were on, still the same thing, but at a greater depth with a greater understanding, because my understanding is expanding all of the time. And with that expansion comes other things as well. At the moment, I spoke before about how sometimes I get things popped into my head as a kind of form of communication, but that now is taking the form of quantum equations. And I'm actually jotting them down because there's a journal, there's a story going on here with these quantum equations, and what I can understand of them is taking me deep into angular velocity, into X, Y, and Z coordinates of algebra, which is really, I think in essence, is probably talking about escaping 3D and space travel, if I'm perfectly fair. But this we'll see how that one develops, because I'm writing all down all the equations and all the little numbers and the power numbers and all of these things that are coming in, and we'll see what that means when that concludes. So again, for me, as we were saying just before we came on air, it's been a strange year. I got back from San Francisco last February 2020, and I sort of hit the ground running, not literally, but hit the ground running. There was lots of perspective, there was lots of talk of me going back, but of course, as we all know, things happened and turned that completely on its head. So now it's almost like it stopped, and it's now going to be rebuilt again at some point in the future. But yes, it's been strange. It's made everyone, not necessarily ourselves, who we're not silly. We don't try and offend people or force our beliefs on people. But I don't wear a mask. I won't be vaccinated. I won't get involved in all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, most of the world are playing it for real. So we have to respect their view of the world, which is different to mine. So really, it's come a lot more internet based. It's become a lot more reclusive in terms of getting to the world via the internet screen, which is not always the most ideal because of technical issues, but that's the way it is at the moment. And I can still do this, and I can still speak to people, albeit being transmitted rather than actually being there.
Yeah, I mean, when you get your information, I'm always fascinated by this. I mean, do you when you're like sitting down and you're wanting to learn more stuff and get more information, do you will it, or do you, I suppose, ask for it and it comes to you, or it just appears? Does it just come into your head, into your space? How is it seems like know what you want to learn? Is it like channeling through to you? Is it without you having to ask for it almost? Is it just channeling in? I mean, how does it work? I mean, it's
what it seems to be. It seems to be the emission of the frequency of wanting to know. And
you're basically putting energy out there, aren't you, really?
Yeah, but basically, I'm sort of, I mean, it's responding to the frequency of me saying, I want to know, I want to learn, I want to expand. And when you've got an aerial that is transmitting that, then that is the frequency that you're going to pick up and come. So it seems to be, I mean, how I always liken it to, if you imagine all those hundreds of years ago, Isaac Newton walking through the field, and he sees the apple falling onto the grass, and he's, why did that fall down and not float upwards? And he gives us the whole theory of gravity that we have today. Now, that kind of thing happens to me when an idea, I will see something or hear something or think of something, and that will then formulate, the theory of. So I think it's just a pulsating frequency of I want to learn, and it just tends to just come, and it can be any time of the day, it can be at night. You hear some songwriters sometimes say, I woke up in the middle of the night with lyrics in my head, and I had to write it down or put it on my phone and send it to myself.
Yesterday, you did that.
Exactly. No, we did that a long time ago.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
But nevertheless.
Yes.
but it's that kind of thing for me. I can wake up and do note to self on my phone to look at it the next day, and we'll get mathematical equations in sleep time and things. So there's many different ways, but I think it's because it's an open portal and emission of frequency that this is what I want to happen.
Do you find it happens more when you're asleep? Because we tend to be more, kind of in tune when we're asleep, aren't we? Kind of more like, connected to that when we're asleep. Do you find that happens more to you at that point?
I think. I find it happens more in the day for me when I'm actually awake. But what happens a lot of the time, I don't remember sleep time. If I remember something from sleep time, it's something significant, and I bring you back and work on what's coming. For argument's sake, an example was just getting the symbol of the square root in mathematical square root, and followed by the numbers 937. Now, when you work out, it took me the whole of the next day to work out the square root of 937, not necessarily what the square root of 937 is, but the actual deeper meaning of what it was telling me. And when I worked it out, it actually goes back to the pharaohs of ancient Egypt and the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. So it's not just random things that come in, it's sort of purposeful and it's relevant. It tends to be relevant things, not, just random nonsense. So, another one was just a symbol of what turned out to be a topology, which is all to do with the meter and the structure of the universe. And again, that came. I just drew the symbol when I woke up, and that's what it turned out to be. So it comes in different formats, but I do find, certainly consciously, I find that it's happening a lot in the day. It may unconsciously be happening more in sleep time, but I just don't recall a lot of the things that happen unless it is really highly significant.
Wow. I mean, a lot of things that I like when you talk about, like symbology, is like us, because a lot of symbols obviously have their own kind of energetic kind of properties, don't they? And that a lot of people will see it. They'll just see it as a logo, or they won't know the in-depth energetic reference to it. So I find that fascinating. So could you tell us more about the symbology, be it where the origins of a lot of these symbols come from, that we see every day, on logos and everything? Because I think a lot of people will kind of, look at these logos and not realise the original, where they came from and what properties they hold. So if you'd like to go into that, if that's okay, because I think that's fascinating. I love that.
It is a fascinating and deep subject, but in essence, every sound has a shape.
Yeah.
So every sound, every frequency will create a shape, and we see that in crop circles, we see that in the Nazca lines, we see that in hieroglyphs. So really, when you see the beauty of a snowflake and you look at all the intimate fractal geometry and different things of a snowflake, that really is a sound, which is frozen into a shape. Now, so symbols, I'm doing a lot of research into the subconscious mind at the moment in relation to how the subconscious mind is really 95% of our brain, our thought. And when you look really into the origin of the true Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost, it's talking about the subconscious mind. Now, if you put it like this, the subconscious mind is a fertile field, and it's what you allow to go in there is what grows in that field. So because we have a lifetime of bad teachers and we have a lifetime of negativity, what we're doing throughout our program life, we are growing weeds in the subconscious mind. So that then becomes a manifestation of reality. So when you have an enlightened mind, that enlightened mind becomes the guardian of the gateway. So you understand what to let in, what not to let in, because the subconscious mind doesn't know what is real and what is not real. Now, scientifically, what is real? In science, real is described as what is measurable and what is observable. So therefore, the things that we believe to be real based on that criteria are made from things that cannot be real because they are not measurable and they're not observable. So the whole of our reality, we never see the outside world because there are waveforms of the universe that our five senses detect, pass the information to the brain, and the brain decodes them to create a familiar world. So we never actually see the outside world with our five senses. So when you see the likes of the heads of Easter Island, which are just show their heads, they're telling you to concentrate on the divine mind and not the five senses, because that is when you will transcend beyond this world and actually see the outside world. So the subconscious mind, we are allowing too many people to plant weeds into our garden. So it's the real Holy Spirit, because spirit comes from spiritus, which means breath, and the subconscious mind controls, among many things, breathing. So when we breathe consciously, we are taking control back of the breathing. We are taking back the spirit, the Holy Spirit, back into the conscious mind. Symbols are extremely important because, again, as I was saying, every shape, every frequency is a sound, or every sound, every frequency has a shape. It's that catch-22 situation. So when we look at a geometric shape, the frequency, the information is going into our subconscious mind. So if we're not guarding those symbols, those things that are coming into the subconscious mind, they may well be planting weeds in the mind. Unless we understand what they mean and we say that one's not coming in. I mean, the whole, when you start analysing words and you look at the word advertisement, well, when you break that down, it is enticing adversity into the mind. Unless we are the guardians of what enters into the garden, that then becomes a manifested reality. So the idea of symbols are important because a lot of people believe that the languages of this world are the likes of English, American English, Japanese, Chinese, German. It's not, it's codes and symbols. When you understand codes and symbols, a complete new reality awakens for you, because the so-called elders and so-called elites and the rulers of this world, which I don't like using that phrase because they're not elite at all. But for want of a better phrase that everyone understands and associates with, the elites of this world speak in codes and symbols, because it is a language that only those who've been selected to understand it ordinarily will understand it, and they can play havoc with our subconscious mind by what these shapes and what these symbols are emitting into our mind. I went out to visit family in the week, and there's a little girl and her father pulled up. Now, when the little girl got out the car, she was wearing a T-shirt with an inverted pentagram. Now, this is a girl who's probably 3 or 4 who has no idea of the power of the inverted pentagram. Neither do her parents, neither anybody else. But it's blatantly on the child's T-shirt, an inverted pentagram. Now, when you look into what do these kind of symbols mean and what kind of energy they are thrusting, they are invocations, they are invoking certain planetary energies. Now, when you start looking at the pentagram, and you're looking at Venus, you're looking at Lucifer, which is Mother Mary, you're looking at Saturn, you're looking at Satan, you're looking at all of these adverse symbols. Now, these are on children's clothing. They're literally everywhere. So it's important that we understand this language of symbols so we can actually be the guardian of our own gateway.
I mean, that's just how it is, isn't it? I mean, it's this. You see symbols everywhere, and they seem, people don't know the reason. They don't realize what they're taking on. I mean, people will say that they don't even think about it, but obviously the subconscious mind is taking it in. I mean, it's just you see it everywhere. I mean, it's like they put this fear of death on us as well, don't they? They put this fear of death, and that's a big thing with everyone, isn't it? That we're locked into the energy level of fear as well. It's just when you can see what I mean, we can only see off the basic level than what you can see, Mark, but where you can see things, can't you? You start to see things you almost see how the work in it a bit. And I suppose from there you can start to guard yourself a little bit. So I think it is important to get an understanding of this, which is why it's great that we have you on, Michael, because you're great at this, and I think this is important information that we all need to get a grip with, really. But the other bit is religion as well, because of course religion is a big thing in the world. It used to be even bigger. And if we could go through how that relates to the human spirit, and how it relates to our subconscious as well, and because there's coding in that as well, and there's lots of coding that people don't detect or pick up on. If we could go through that, I mean, obviously the Bible, I know you've worked a lot on decoding the Bible. There's so much in that. I mean, my mum is like quite religious, so sometimes discussions about that, and she's like, "What are you doing? Blasphemous!" So I suppose that can be difficult when you're talking to religious people. That's another question. How do you get around that? I mean, you must have been approached I presume, by people of quite a religious standing. Have looked at your work and thought, "Oh my God." Have you had anybody like look at that from a religious point of view and think, actually, that's, and you've almost changed their perception, and they can see a bit more of what's going on? Have you had that as well? Have you?
Yeah, I've had all sorts, really, from hecklers in the audience who are religious to yes, and people who have been in the religious sort of arena for many, many years. Mm-hmm. One of them is a friend of mine who challenged me and gave me 2 scriptures from each of the books of the Bible and said, translate this correctly, which I did, and which I'm sort of in the process of doing. So, yes, of course, and the problem is people have been told what the truth is. And if I go to a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, or I go to a synagogue of Judaism, or I go to a church, the priest who stands on the altar, which basically means place of sacrifice, but when you have the priest that stands on the altar, or whoever, they are telling you that this is the truth. So as far as the parishioners are concerned, they don't need to look anywhere else, because this is the truth. Now, there's 4,200 recorded religions in this world who are all telling you that they are the truth. So that's 4,200 of them telling you that they're not right, we are. But what they don't realise is, when you look at it at its esoteric levels, its origins, they are all worshipping the same single thing anyway. But the name changes, the location changes. And when you look at truth, well, truth in Egypt is really Mahat, which is symmetry. So when you get into symmetry is the inner workings of our reality. It is the laws of nature. So every time we look at anything in our reality, in our nature, it is symmetrical, it is symmetry. So that really is the truth, the symmetry, the Ma'at of Egypt, the truth. But they are being told that they have the truth. Now, when you go to churches, the first thing that strikes you is the beautiful geometry on many of the stained glass windows and of the churches. Now, this geometry has a frequency. That frequency is compatible with a harmonious sanctity of enlightenment at its origin. But there are certain characters in history, particularly like Rome, where you have the Gregorian chant, and now Pope Gregory basically outlawed the chanting and harmonious singing in the church and replaced that with the Gregorian chant. Now, the Gregorian chant takes people away from the harmony of what they were doing. So when you walk into a church, originally, it had a different meaning, it had a different reason than was now mimicked or taken over from. So people are going to really be in for quite a considerable shock when they realise that the Church of Rome has really duped the world through various outlets. And when you look at, the beloved Pope, Father, Patriarch, patriarch comes from Ayib, which means adversary. Who else do we call the adversary? Satan. Now, when you look at the papal throne and the papal headdress, the crown, it has the Latin words vicarius filii Dei, which means instead of the Son of God. So what we have is the Pope is the representative of Satan on earth, but he is under the guise of Christ, the true light. Now, the true light is what we know as the Christ consciousness, which is really the spirit of truth. Now, the original true Bible is the Giza Plateau in Egypt. The Bible, all the stories of the Bible are written within the pyramids.
Wow.
What has happened? The Hebrews, the Kabbalah, have taken the Egyptian philosophy and teachings, corrupted it, but the Hebrew became the later Christianity because the Bible is the Hebrew scriptures, the divisions of the Hebrew scriptures. So the current Bible is the Hebrew scriptures, which came from Egypt, but it was corrupted. So when you look at the likes of Noah's Ark, which is the Great Pyramid, when you look at the birth, the true birth rate of Christ, which is the 11th of September, 9/11, which is also famous elsewhere, you see that the Giza Plateau is actually marking astronomically these things. So the woman appears clothed in the sun with the moon beneath her feet. That is Virgo on the 11th of September with the sun in the abdomen, the birth of the Virgin. That is on the 11th of September. Now, if you were to stand in Bethlehem on that date, and you look at the lower belt of Orion, Alnitak, which means the belt, the girdle, it will be at the same diameters and location, 51 degrees, 51 seconds, as the Great Pyramid, as the slope of the Great Pyramid. Now, when you're actually in the ascending and descending chambers of the Great Pyramid, and you look north of east, you go straight the way through Bethlehem. So all this is recorded, that the coming of the true light, the true knowledge, is measured within the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And it's really talking about the Sphinx, which is the tribe of Judah, from where the Christ was meant to have come, the tribe of Judah, the lion, the Leo. The Leo governs solar mysteries. So we have the true light, which is the solar sun, the divine Christ. When the divine Christ stepped out of divinity, it became Jupiter. Jupiter was known as Jesus, Zeus as in the Mount Olympus, the gods of Olympus. Jesus became Jesus. So when Jesus stepped out of divinity, out of the sun, he became Jupiter, which represents man. Jupiter is all to do with expansion. The sun is all to do with enlightenment. You have Saturn, which is to do with contraction and restriction. That is why in law you sign a contract, because the god of law is Saturn. You sign a contract, you are contracted. That's why you sign a contract. You then have the likes of Mother Mary, which is really Lucifer, Venus, the Queen of Heaven. That then when you look into the Hebrew for Lucifer, it comes to Hellel. When you look at Hellel a little bit deeper, it comes from the word Yelhel, Yelel, which means to wail, to cry. That takes you to the Wailing Wall of Jerusalem, which is actually a wall that was once a Roman fort to Venus, Lucifer. So when you're actually praying, and one of the prayers to Lucifer in the Luciferian system is pray to Lucifer, for he has fallen for you. So you are praying to Lucifer at the Wailing Wall. Now, all this gestation like this with their pelvic thrust is mimicking copulation with Lucifer.
Wow.
All of this comes from the Church of Rome, who have basically mimicked the Jewish writings. They used to have Jewish mystics come in. They analysed every single Jewish word. They learnt Hebraic typology, which is really, the Hebrews used to write multiple layers of meanings into their writing. Hebraic typology. Now, when you understand it at its deepest level, you start to get this. So everything really is all to do with Satan, Lucifer, all of these different things. And the Roman Church is really pinnacle in relation to serpent worship, Satan worship. Now, when you look at Vatican, Vatis Can, it means divine serpent. When you look at the God of the Bible, it is Satan, not the true God. And that is why so many people are massacred and murdered. You know, it even tells you when you look at the likes of Yahweh plopped his Leviathan body into the Jordan. Leviathan is a serpent. Who were some of the Jewish mystics? The Levites. Levite means serpent. It's talking about the great serpent, which is Satan.
Wow. Yes. See, it means it's like it's all inverted, isn't it? It's like, I mean, you look around the world and you look at things, everything's inverted. You know, it's and everything's kind of in reality the other way around to what you've been taught. It's just crazy, isn't it? You know, but it's only when you start to learn this you realise just how much the world's being duped. Really, you know, it's. But then they, like you said, that these elites. I know it's not a great term, but they hold that. They hold that. That's. I suppose that's the power they have over us. But it's not really power, is it? When you think about it, it's not really as such. Is it more like the power of information they've got over us rather than anything else? Because once you enlighten yourself, that power goes. They've lost that power.
And that's why they want to keep people in the dark. But elite simply means Satan's chosen. So, but when you look at the 5 books of Moses, which makes up the Torah, and that is from Genesis to Deuteronomy, I guarantee now, if I walk outside and give 100 people, 1,000 people, 2,000 people a Bible and said, read that, they'll pick it up and they'll read it from start to finish, from left to right. The problem is Hebrew is written from right to left. So there's the first mistake. You should be reading it from Deuteronomy to Genesis. That's where you get the correct meaning, because it's complete reverse. Now, Genesis, in the beginning, Genesis is Bereshit, which means in the mind. So in the beginning, we were in the mind. In the beginning was the word. The word is the circle. It is order. Now, with a circle, the end is the beginning is the end. So when you look at Deuteronomy to Genesis, and you think that Genesis to Deuteronomy is the beginning to the end, well, the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. But you read from right to left, which is the correct Hebrew translation. Then it brings up a few interesting things about Genesis, which is now. The time of Genesis is now, not then. And the when you read Genesis as the last book instead of the first book, it talks about Zion. It talks about the holy state of Israel. So it didn't start with Genesis, it ends on Genesis.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? It's just, you know, it's how many people don't know this? You know, it's mind-blowing, really. I mean, what about with the current situation? Do you think there's a shift of consciousness happening with everything that's happening in the world? Because you know, to bring it into like kind of today, because we're seeing a big divide with people who, to some extent, are seeing through it and can see beyond it, and then others that are just, you know, taking everything at face value at what we're being told. There's a divide. It's quite a prominent divide. Do you think that there is a kind of a change of consciousness happening? A shift. Do you feel that as well? Do you feel there's a shift happening?
I do. What we have at the moment is when the likes of the Bible talks about the end days, it's really talking about the change of an age. So when you look at the likes of Christ washing people's feet, well, that is telling you about the Piscean age, because in zodiacal man, the 2 fish, the Pisces, are the feet. So the Christ is the Piscean age. We have Adam and Eve, which is the Taurian. We have Moses, which is Aries, hence the firstborn, the lamb's blood on the door, coming down and carving the golden bull at the bottom of Mount Sinai. It's talking about the changing of an age. Now, when you go into these kind of things, you notice that each age has certain key words that represent it. So the Piscean age is, I believe. The age that we're going into, some say we're in it, some say we're just transitioning into it, but the age that we're going into, Aquarius, is the I know. So we're going from a transition from I believe to I know. Now with that, because Aquarius is an extremely stubborn, thick sign, you'll see a lot of upheaval. You'll see the breaking down of financial institutions. You'll see unrest in the street. You'll see all of these different things that the Bible describes as the end days. But it's talking about the end of an age, because the prophets of the Bible and the prophets of the ancient past were the readers of the stars. They were astronomers. They were astrologers. Now, when you read the celestial narrative, which is the stars, you understand the sidereal years, you understand the great years, the great ages, and they are able to predict with certainty because they know how things react. They are able to prophesize. So the likes of Nostradamus is a part of these mystery schools that prophesize based on the movement of stars. So there will be people who fight it. There will be people who resist the change. There will be people who are scared to go away from the belief and the faith that someone is going to come and save them. And it's too much of a I take responsibility for myself for them to leave that behind.
Yeah.
Because when you leave faith behind, and when you leave the belief that someone is going to come and save you, so you don't have to do anything for yourself, that sometimes is difficult for people to actually take on board. So they prefer to be plugged into the matrix rather than unplugged through the age of Aquarius. And this is where we get this divide about people wanting to stay and people wanting to move forward. So there always will be, because these things are written into nature. The movement of the stars, how the stars behave, how that has an effect on people, how that has an effect on all the planets of the solar system and beyond. These things have an enormous effect because they are enormous planetary bodies, but they are also messengers, because when you look at how the planets are stacked, they are stacked in archangels. So there's your messengers, there's your archangels. Now with people who have this high frequency vision, they are able to see this etheric energy manifest. So when someone turns around and says, I saw Mother Mary last night, you didn't. You saw the planetary energy that manifested how you wanted it to manifest. So these energies can manifest in any guise they wish, based on the benefit of the observer. And these are really the messengers of man. Now, when you can understand this, when you understand these messages, you can make these predictions. Now, man, whatever is written will be.
Wow. I mean, with the whole, it's like I read, with Graham Hancock, he talks about like story of these native shamans. They used ayahuasca, to transverse through like consciousness and that. And a lot of people, when they do this, I suppose with other psychedelics as well, they visualize according to their own, I suppose, energy and what they want to put out there. They'll see Jesus, they'll see Mother Mary, they'll manifest that, won't they? That as what they want. So I suppose that's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Of what they're doing.
Yes, it is, because energy is formless. A lot of the time, but it still has an intelligence.
Yes,
and it still picks up on waveforms. It's still when you look into science and reality, there are particles, subatomic particles, etc., exist in a superposition. Now, what that means is they are in multiple states at the same time. Now, we can only see one of those states. So if you imagine that I'm holding a dice in my hand, there are now 6 probable outcomes. I roll the dice, and let's say, for argument's sake, number 5 appears. Number 5 is now the manifest, the one, the only reality that I can see. The other 5 faces have now become into improbable. And that really is how reality works, because when we observe, the universe is observer dependent. So when we observe, we collapse the wave into that one probable outcome, which is the probable outcome that we see. So when I go out and look at a tree, I am seeing what my brain is decoding as the familiar world. But what is actually behind that tree is interference waves that are colliding and making a shape, making a pattern.
Wow.
But we don't see that because we can only see one probability out of multiple probabilities. So we never see the outside world unless we transcend beyond the 5 senses. Now, when you look at the likes of the eye of Horus, and people are correct, yes, it's the pineal gland, it's the eye of the Illuminati and all that. But you find you go to the esoteric level, but then you go deeper, you go further. So yes, the eye is the pineal gland. It is the eye of Horus. But the Egyptians were also telling us with the eye about the 5 senses. Because in the Egyptian mythology, Set ripped Horus's eye into 6 parts. So what do they mean by the 6 parts? Well, they're talking about the 5 senses The left part of the eye is close to the nose, so that's smell. This part of the eye is close to the ear, so that is hearing. Obviously, vision is the eye. You have the loop that looks like a tongue, that is taste, so on and so on. So what they're saying is with knowledge, with consciousness, where the energy, the serpent energy within reaches the brow, you will then transcend the five senses. So within the Eye of Horus symbol, they are telling you to transcend the five senses. Within the heads of Easter Island, just the head showing, they are telling you to transcend beyond the five senses of the body. They are leaving the keys to enlightenment. So again, most people just look at the Eye of Horus and think, Illuminati, pineal gland, that's correct. But it's deeper than that.
There's all these messages in a lot of these monuments, isn't there, and things that people don't pick up on. They don't read the energy of it. I mean, obviously the pyramids have such a lot of, messages within it. And I suppose even we can relate a lot of that. Same with the Bible. I've from you talk last time, and I've heard several talks. The way that Christ is related to us. The way it's. The way our brain is and the way everything works, it's all connected. It's just amazing. I was wondering if you could just go through that. The way that the Christ consciousness and the connection to that, and how it's significant, to us, how that signifies it. I wonder if you go through that again, because I think it's a great piece of information with the Christ consciousness.
Well, of course, the Christ consciousness is one name for it. The Spirit of Truth is another name for it. Yeah. Now, the second coming of Christ is where we get the return of the Spirit of Truth. Now, the Spirit of Truth, again, is really a higher consciousness of deeper understanding of the meanings of these things. So everybody is really the Christ potential. Yeah. And there is no specific man that was the Christ. Now, when you look at the word anointed, the Messiah, well, in Egypt, that comes down to crocodile fat, because anointed also means chosen ones. So the chosen ones were anointed in crocodile fat, which is the Messiah, the anointed one. And the reason it was the crocodile is the original dragon, which became synonymous with the serpent, which is wisdom, etc. In Egypt, that was also associated with the crocodile, which is why one of the pyramid shafts are pointing towards Draco, the dragon, because the dragons were the serpent priests, they were the kings, they were the pharaohs, because they had a higher knowledge, they had this serpent knowledge. So the Christ itself and biblical characters are really talking about, metaphorically, the human potential. So when you look at the likes of Adam and Eve, you are looking at a story of the fall of man because of the incorrect use of the serpent force. Because that is Eve, Chiva, which means serpent. So when Eve accused the serpent, she was accusing herself. Accusing yourself, self-accusation, you become the devil, diabolos, divide and conquer, to throw slander. So what it's saying is if you act like him, you become him. So it's really, when you look at Adam, dam in Hebrew is blood. It's also damsel. It's even payment. So when you pay, you are paying with blood. That is the symbology of it, because dam in Hebrew, as in Adam, talks about blood. So that in Hebrew is Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Now, Aleph is the ox. So Adam is really the blood of the ox, the blood of Taurus. It is the Taurian age. Now, the blood of the ox talks about bestiality and bodily pleasures. So by the incorrect use of this serpent force within, that was the fall of man, where we became like the devil. So the whole of the Adam and Eve is talking about the Taurian age, but the fall of man through the incorrect use of this sacred force within. Now, when you look at Draco, which is where one of the shafts of the pyramids points to, Draco relates to the base chakra. What is at the base chakra? Kundalini, your serpent force. So all of these characters are metaphors, and that goes all the way through the Bible, through Egypt, through all of these ancient cultures, through the Anunnaki, through the Bible, through all religious books. They are metaphorical terms for human potential, for our potential. So the Christ is not something that walked. The Christ is the spirit of truth that can occupy all of us. When we have a greater understanding of the meanings of the mysteries, we become the spirit of truth. We become the Christ. And there's also significance as to why Christ died at age 33, because that is 33 hertz, which again is a frequency of sacred geometry and different things. Now, the 33rd hertz has all the properties that you associate with the life of Christ. So it's a real deep and esoteric meaning, but the Christ didn't live. Now, when you look at the only Jewish scriptures that weren't tainted or corrupted by the Romans was the one they couldn't find, which was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or the Qumran Cave Scrolls, were taken by the Knights Templar to Rosslyn Chapel. Now I've looked at a map of the layout of Rosslyn Chapel, and I've looked at a map of Scotland, and when I've overlaid the two, it tells you where they hid them.
Oh, wow.
And so I found where they've hidden the scrolls. Now, the good thing is about these scrolls is they were written at the time that Christ supposedly walked the earth. These were Jewish mystics, and not once did they ever mention the King of the Jews. Not once did they ever mention Christ in these holy scriptures. And this was the books that were written at the time that Christ supposedly walked. When you look at the likes of the Shroud of Turin, that was really Jacques de Molay, who was a Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who was crucified as Christ would have supposedly was crucified because he denied the existence of Christ. So when you start looking at all of these different things, even some of the cardinals of the Vatican are saying it's not Christ, but it reminds us of him. Because it's not Christ, it's most likely Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. So these things are metaphorical. They are human potential. They were never people that existed. When you look at Jupiter, Jesus, Jupiter, Ju, is the same as Jew, Jew. The tribe of Judah, the Sphinx of Egypt, Leo, which it represents. So when you look at King Jupiter, you are looking at the King of the Jews. We are talking planetary influence and planetary energy, not physical people.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, what about one thing that's popped into my head is about the horoscopes. How does that? How is the true nature of horoscopes? How does that relate to us? How's the significance of that? Horoscopes.
Extremely, because horoscope comes from Horus.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at cipher, now cipher is basically a secret language where you get a letter and you replace it with another letter, a number, or a symbol. Now, when you look at the cipher of the name Jesus Christ, depending if you times it or add it, it basically comes up to 432, which is relating to the sun. If you times those numbers, you get 864. Now, 864,000 is the diameter of the sun. So, in cipher, Jesus Christ relates to the sun. Now, the sun, when you look at cipher and you look at Horus and you look at Yeshua, it equals 2,160. The sun spends 2,160 years in each sign of the zodiac. So the zodiac, really, the horoscope is Horus, the sun, through the horoscope, the 12. So it's the 12 disciples, and sun in cipher is 13. So the king, the sun, was the 13th. The 12 disciples of the zodiac and the 13th. The zodiac, the animals of the zodiac, are the animals of Noah's Ark. They are the 12 disciples of Christ, and Christ, the sun, is the 13th.
Wow.
So even astrology, horoscope, it relates to Egypt, it relates to the astronomical markers of the Giza Plateau. It relates to all these things, and 432 is also significant because it is the frequency that created the tetrahedron, which are the pyramids. So at 432 hertz, you get the pyramid shape, the tetrahedron. Now, when you look at 432, it relates to the golden ratio. The square factor, a square factor of 432 is 144. So you have 144,000 lime scales, you have 144,000 biblical people who will stand at the right-hand side of Christ. It's talking about numbers, numerology, astrology, all
Isn't
of these things.
144,000 how many Jehovah's Witnesses say is going to be kind of
Yes.
ascended to heaven and live
Yes.
by Christ? And yeah.
But it's a sacred number, because if you add
Yeah,
1 plus 4
yeah.
plus 4, you get 9, which is
Yeah.
again is an esoteric number.
Yeah.
So they are quoting things that they do not understand, because they're told this is what it means. It doesn't mean what they're being told it means.
Yeah.
So as I said, the square factor of 432 is 144. 144 relates to light. Again, it is the spirit of truth. So it's extremely important numerology as well. So there's so much going on within the Giza plateau that it really is. It's a harmonic key, also to opening portals as well. But it's what it is a astrological marker for the return of Christ, the spirit of truth.